Cyber security for beginners, career advice, how to get started in cybersecurity free and cheap, things that you can do today to get the ball rolling. Okay, so we're going to do number 8 today. Okay, so cybersecurity for beginners, how to study habit. So first I got a few tips before we get to the main part of the video. So previous video we talked about buying computers. Be sure you keep them cool so they don't overheat. Now you don't have to be ridiculous about it, just 70, 72 is fine. If they overheat, they will break. That's why there's built-in fans in the computer. But if it's real hot outside, you're keeping the windows open, that's going to be too hot for a computer. So just try to keep them cool. I've worked in factories where they have huge rooms and they're air conditioned, and it's like an ice house. If you've ever been in an ice house, it's like walking into your freezer in your kitchen. You don't have to keep them that cool. Just 70 degrees is fine. Something I do too is I turn them off. When I'm not using them, I turn them off. So that gives them a chance to cool down. So they're only on maybe a few hours a day, 6 hours a day. Or I switch. One's on for a few hours, then I turn it off, and then the other one's on for a few hours. Okay, so FYI, I realize I'm getting carried away with this how-to study thing, but I'm talking to certain people who've never gone to school. Most of us did practically nothing in high school, so if you're one of them, don't worry about it. We've all been there. The important thing is sooner or later you got to buckle down and do something. A common statement is buckle down and get serious. That's actually a common statement. I've had a lot of older students, and I've heard about many older people starting when they're older. So I've got a clarification area here from the previous video. I kept using the word port. And I usually tell people port is just a fancy word for a place to plug something in. Okay, that's all it is. Don't let the word port mess you up. Like you could call the plug in your wall for electricity a port. You're plugging something in there. When you buy a computer from Amazon, check the ships from and sold by. We touched on that a little bit, but I didn't really clarify. I prefer both from Amazon, mainly for return policies and warranty. Other sellers may be great too, but read their comments and their sales numbers. Toward the end, I talked about the Ethernet cable. That's how you connect your computer to the internet or your home network. Okay, so you either use Ethernet or Wi-Fi. You don't need both, just one. The Ethernet plug looks like a big old-fashioned telephone plug. It plugs into the back of the computer, into the network card. Okay, and we'll talk more about that when we get to setting up a computer and things like that. Here's a tip. I think we touched on this topic earlier. There's nothing wrong with partying. We've all done it. But if you are zoned out from the night before, it's tough to study. Watch a few vids on what booze does to your internal organs. And I've got a few real life stories here, but some of them are pretty gruesome. I don't really know if we want to get into that now. But booze, drugs, drinking too much pop, heavy smoker, my point is, avoid that stuff. Why spend years studying to get a good career only to end up dying young, 20 to 30 years early? You're basically cutting 20 years off your life. Instead of living till 80, you die young at 60. I realize when you're young, age 60 seems like a far time away, but it's really not. I'm 67 and I feel better than I did in my 20s. I talked about teaching music in my previous videos. I had an older student go in my restroom and look in the mirror, and then he came out and said, "I look older in your mirror. When I look in the mirror at home, I look younger. I look the way I picture myself." I see myself doing that now too. It's weird. It's just something that you'll bump into when you're older. FYI, as you're searching around for places to learn, you'll bump into 1 week training seminars, short training, a few weeks, a few months, but they're not for everyone. They're usually very expensive. We're talking thousands of dollars. Fast-paced, not good for beginners. That's the key thing here. They're good if the course expands on your current knowledge. You already know the topic, but you just want to get better at that topic. You don't want to go into a high-level seminar cold. You don't know nothing about it, and you expect them to bring you from 0 to 100 in a week. You would think they wouldn't let you sign up for it, if they realize, hey, this isn't the right type of person to take this course. But it's a free world. They'll let you sign up. Let's say you're 50% there, and you take that course, that'll get you to maybe 80%. Would you go to a doctor for an ailment that took a 1 week course on the treatment? Probably not. Advanced doctors learning new advanced technique, I could see a 1 week course. But to learn a whole topic in 1 week, that would be a tough. One time in my younger days, this is back around 2000, I was in a big bookstore in Cleveland. The place was huge. It was place used to be a bank. They turned it into a bookstore. One of them big old-fashioned banks, And I was looking at C++, Java programming books. I saw this older fellow there. He was maybe in his 40s, 50s. He was talking to a lot of young people, and you could see he was some type of executive type, Later on, he must have saw that I was looking at the programming books, because he walked up to me. This is a total stranger. And he started talking about those 1 week courses. I only talked to him for a couple minutes. But something that I remember him saying was he took some of those, 1 or 2 of those. His exact phrase was, "I didn't learn nothing." And this is somebody who probably knew the business. And then I know a person that took a data science course. I think it was $10,000. And it might have been a 10-week course, I'm not sure. As of now, they're not using it. So it might have been a good course for somebody who already had been working in the data science field. But to go in there cold and expect it to bring you from 0 to 100 in a few weeks, that would have been tough. I would say look for long-term training. We're talking years to learn a field. Not too long, though. That's one of the problems with colleges. You go there to learn computers, and you spend most of your time taking English, science, philosophy, things like that. Yeah. Now that I think of it, I remember looking through a program a few years ago, 2-year program at a community college, and I'm thinking, that 2-year program, there's only 2 computer classes. The first 2 years was all just general studies. That's what they call it, general studies, English, math, science. I have a friend that went for accounting, ended up being a CPA, all types of certifications. I remember when they were going to college, the school actually made them take a biology class. She was studying medical stuff for accounting. Now, I suppose that's good if you're going to go into accounting into a hospital, right? But at the time, they had no idea. For computer programming, it might take a few years to really get it. First couple years, you might have a good handle on it. But to be able to comprehend long programs, that takes a while. Like, I can go out and be a pretty good golfer in 6 months, right? Can I hit a 300-yard drive like some of the pros? Not consistently, no. Where the pros can, because they've been doing it for a long time. We've all seen ads where the young person says, "I learned programming using this quick method." I don't believe it. It may be true for some young people. Some young people are pretty sharp. That's not my experience. It's very tough. Over the last 30 years, I've heard a few nightmare stories caused by bad coding. So when you talk about learning to program and do cybersecurity, think about long-term training. When it comes to studying, your brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. It's like lifting weights. Get into the habit of reading and studying. Start with 30 minutes a day. So I remember when I was going to college, this was like back in the late 70s, walking from building to building, and I was behind the dean of one of the departments, and he was talking to some other students. He later became president of that branch, and I remember him saying, to prepare to go to college, he would just start reading. So you get used to reading. And I would add comprehending. Not only reading, but know what you read. Comprehending is reading a paragraph, and when you're done with that paragraph, you know what you read. So we've all done it. You sit there and you read and you read and you read, and you get a couple pages ahead and you have no idea what you just looked at. So you really have to think it through as you read each sentence. The adult attention span is 20 minutes. Teaching college, that was one of the things I picked up along the way. You're in a 50-minute class. Well, after 20 minutes, most people are daydreaming about something else. You have to get their attention. So that's normal. If that happens to you, don't worry about it. That's normal. Don't be sitting there saying, "Oh, I can't do this." Well, no, you're normal. And yes, it's okay to doze off while studying or watching videos. One story I use there is when I was studying the electronic music thing, I bought a bunch of video cassettes on the topic. Great videos. The guy making the videos was very funny. He was fun to watch. But I remember sitting there with a buddy one night. We were watching the videos, and both of us fell asleep. He had worked all day, I had taught all day, and late at night we're trying to watch these videos and we both just fell asleep. Now, when you got into the meat of the topic, it was boring. Studying how to use a machine and what it's going to do. So, good information, but it was still kind of boring. This here is very important. A 10-second distraction sets your thoughts back 20 minutes. A 10-second distraction sets your thoughts back 20 minutes. So learn to avoid distractions. Set up your study area out of the flow of traffic in the house. Don't try to study at the kitchen table, because people are coming by, walking by, saying, "Hey, what are you doing? What you studying today?" and stuff like that. So instructional videos are great. I've used a lot of them. Even before YouTube, I used to buy cassettes, videotapes, and DVDs. Now it's all on YouTube. But you still got to read. My saying is, whoever reads the most wins. Okay? Whoever reads the most wins. Of course, you'll get bored and doze off while reading. I still do it myself. That's normal. Try to read and comprehend 10 pages per hour. Okay? Go for 10 pages per hour. You may be slower, you may be faster. But I'm just trying to give you a number to shoot for. Go for 10 pages per hour. So if you want to get through a chapter by the end of the week, 50-page chapter, you go 10 pages a day. So comprehension is the tricky part. Did you ever read a paragraph and not know what you read? Read and think about each sentence. Sometimes when you get into the programming thing or the more technical stuff, one page could take days or a week. So that's normal. So read. While video instruction is great, you must read books. Would you go to a medical doctor who only learned from video? Well, maybe. These days there's a lot of instructional things on video. I think you get my point. When I first got into computers, I read 10,000 pages. I actually kept track. Now that included books, magazines, single articles. Then I got into computer programming courses. And I didn't keep track of the pages there. There was a lot. Sometimes skim through a whole book, 15 minutes just to see what's in it. And then real good part in the very back. That last chapter is what I'm looking for. Or a section in the appendix. It's like, okay, that's the part I want there. That's what I'm looking for. So, if you're not sure about what you want to do for a career, that's common. Some of us don't know what we want to do. A lot of us just know this is what I want to do. Okay? So there's just something inside of us that says, I got to do this. I got to do computers. I got to do cybersecurity or whatever you're into. If you're not sure what you want to do for a career, just pick something and get into it. Now, that sounds easy, but if you're not really into it, how long will it last? When I was teaching music, a young student's mother, I think the fellow was pretty young. He was probably 12 years old. He was a metalhead guitar player. She said to me, I just want him to do something. I can still remember her saying this, and this is the exact sense. She said, I don't care what he does. I just want him to do something. While there is nothing wrong with changing careers, try not to change careers too many times. You'll be starting from scratch every time. Careers are a ladder. You start at the bottom and work your way up. If you're always changing careers, you'll always be at the bottom. So it's okay to change companies, but do so horizontally, with a pay increase of about $2,000, and that's right out of the books. Keep your nose clean at work. Don't be stealing office supplies. Don't be chasing the woman. You're working on your career. A common trick for executive hiring is they'll take you out to dinner, or maybe even a stripper club. They're not being nice. They're checking your personality to see if you're a heavy drinker. Okay? Remember, office parties are still at work. Stop in, say hi, eat some pizza, and leave. I've heard that a lot of marriages start as office romances, but don't do it. Don't ruin your career. If things go bad, you'll probably be the one that has to leave. You, as the guy, will probably be the one that has to leave. College days and partying too much. I think we've talked about this. A few days a month of partying is enough. That's all you really need. Last I knew, back around 2000 or so, there's a 75% dropout rate. Now, as I put this together, I looked it up. These days they're saying it's a 50% dropout rate. Well, yeah, because there's fewer people going to school. If you really want to go to college, you're serious these days. So you're going to study more and you won't drop out. But something that I didn't add here, I think only 5% of the United States population goes to college. 5%. And only 1% of that 5% graduate. So you might go to college for 30 years and not graduate. There's a whole list of courses that you need. Let's say, for example, you need English 1, English 2, English 3, and English 4. Right? Over a 4-year period. You don't take English 4. Well, you could take 100 classes. If you don't take that English 4, you don't graduate. So, with this dropout rate, what usually happens is we're at college, we're young, let's go out party. You go out on Saturday night. Well, we went out on Saturday, we got to go out on Friday too. Well, Monday night is football, so let's go sports bar. Tuesday night is half off. Thursday night is ladies' night. Wednesday night, there's a band. So what happens is you end up going to the bar every day. So that's why I say don't even start it. We've talked about this earlier. Just give it 4 good years and then you'll be set. Give it 4 good years at college. In general, everyone knows that it takes 5 years to get a 4-year degree. Okay? Some colleges might try to push you through it faster. One college I taught at, one class, the whole class told me they were taking 7 courses. 4 courses, 12 hours is usually full time. 12 hours. And I always thought of that as 4 courses, maybe 5, But 7, that's a lot. Plus, these days, lots of college people are in sports or some type of other activity at the school, and that would be real hard to take that many classes and do all the extracurricular activities. Okay, so your history. So we all come from somewhere else, you know. So don't worry about it, you know. You don't have to be a genius to go into this field, you know. I've had students that worked at a burger joint, were unemployed, they have some other type of previous career, they're manual labor jobs, they've been in jail or music, you know. It doesn't matter where you came from. We're all from somewhere else. Just buckle down and get serious about cybersecurity. In the old days, our grandfathers or great-grandfathers had one 30-year career. That became obsolete around 1970, 1980. You know, factories started closing up, moving overseas. Company loyalty is gone. Okay? For the most part. There might be a few companies out there that are still loyal. They'll stick behind you no matter what. But usually it doesn't work that way anymore. So it's common for computer techs to job hop. But companies are getting wise to it. Why you might job hop? Low pay, bad environment, years of code neglect, etc. So what do I mean by code neglect? One executive said to me, if our customers knew how bad our code is in our machines, they'd never buy our product. One student told me he worked at a factory that built machines. He said his company has a whole team of programmers trying to decipher the spaghetti code in the machines. So what happens there is, as they add new code, they don't take out the old code. They leave it there. They put comments in. So the code doesn't actually run, but it's still there. It's the same as like if you were going to run new electrical wires in your house. You put in new electrical wires, but you don't take the old wires out. You just cut them. So they aren't doing nothing, but they're still there. It's the same idea. And the spaghetti code is just, by that they mean it's just a mess. So these days, instead of one long 30-year career, it's common to have 3 careers. You'll hear people say, that's what I did in a previous life. Well, that's what they're talking about, in their previous career. And then I've even seen articles that say 7 mini careers. So 7 mini careers, that's really pushing it. That's like a change every, 7 years or so. So just remember, careers are a ladder. Stay on the ladder. Stay in the same discipline. The discipline is cybersecurity.